have a good weekend. Please let me know if you can see my screen. And before we get started, do we have any questions? Then actually, I didn't get any emails, email IDs to share the videos. Uh, Please do share your emails so that I can share the recordings if required. Okay. So, sorry. Today we'll see some of those topics like syntaxes and naming conventions. So before we get started, I will explain you the some called naming conventions. So like we write a program, right, in the development mostly. So when we're writing a programming, right, like we now once we get started, we're going to say write classes, Visual Force pages, and all. So before we're getting started, like we have to know some naming convention that need to be followed as a standards and as part of a clean code. So as a name itself suggests a naming conventions. So it's not something it will stop from executing. So it will not stop even if you don't follow these conventions also. But it will be easy for you to read the code and easy to understand when you follow this naming convention. So first of all, like there are different names also for like how we write this naming. First we'll see different naming convention, and next we'll see what all the places we're going to use which convention. First one is a camel case. So if in the naming itself, if you observe, so starting letter will be a small case and everything will be a smaller case only. But whenever you feel like you have like words, we don't use any spaces in any of the convention. There will not be spaces are allowed. Without spaces, we have to write. So whenever you have like two or three words, the combining and giving as a naming, then we have to give first letter of the next second word, third word, or like every word, first letter will be given as a capital letter, except the first word. That's a camel case. So you can see some example here, this one, and this is the one, first letter is small, and wherever we have like a new word, the first letter will become the capital letter. Is another different example. And a Pascal case. Pascal case is so Pascal case is almost same, but the starting letter would be a capital letter. That is called a Pascal case. And the kebab case. Kebab case is every letter, even if it's a new word or same word, everything will be in the small cases. But if we have a different word or like multiple words, it will be separated by the dash symbol. You can see the example here, and here also you can see. And if you have any like a component name, the example given here, so it will be in a kebab case. And snake case. So this is like exactly same as the kebab case, but thing was in the kebab case everything will be in a small letters. But in snake case everything will be in a capital letters. I think if you like you don't need to worry about what case it is if you want to follow how to write. So thing was, if you use everything as a small, then it just even it's a different words or multiple words combining, you want to give the naming, then you have to use a dash colon, sorry, dash as a separator. If it's all capital letters, underscore as a separator. And if you want to use like a Pascal or a camel case, every new word starting letter will be a capital letter. First letter will be depends on a camel or a Pascal. If it's a camel case, small letter, Pascal, it's going to be a capital letter. Now, usually what are all the places we're going to use this variable names? The places are like a class. When I'm saying a class, so where we're writing these classes in Apex programming language, right? So Apex class is the one place. There is another thing called a Apex trigger. So this is not be covered, but this is also a separate file that we're going to create while writing some code in the triggers. So Apex trigger, and then Visual Force page, and what all the place and lightning components. Lightning components. So these are the places where we are going to like write the code, use the variables and all. So now let's see one by one how the syntaxes of each of this will be. So again, we'll be having variable here. Okay. Now we're going to see, mostly we're getting started with the Apex class and variable. So I'm not going to explain you any of this at this point. So we'll get started with syntax of the Apex class and a variable. And we're going to cover some of the topics over here as part of a syntax. Okay. Now, hope everyone can hear me. I don't see anything. Yeah, it's getting recording. Okay. Now, if you have a class, then it's going to be a syntax like this. So you're going to use any of these modifiers, private, public, or global. This is called a access modifier. Access modifier. That means like what kind of access that the class is going to be. It is across, like it's not the access that we're going to give the class to a different user. It doesn't mean that. The access modifier is how this class is going to be accessed. Like if we say in terms of OWD, so we have OWD, right? So arg wide defaults for an object. Like what is the minimum level of access that you're going to give for an object, correct? Similarly, for the class also, what is the access modifier for that class? Like what are all the places it can be accessed? It's not to the person, but as an individual class, like how it can be accessed, like what are the possible places where we can access this class. Now, let's see. The private means this is a private class and nobody else can access it, and only the so what a class consists of. Class consists of a variables and methods, right? So what are the variables it have and methods it have? It will not be accessible outside the class. So the class itself, a private class. You can use this class as an individual, and it cannot be called from the other classes, anything outside the class. Okay. And public. Public means when you're using a access modifier as a public, then this class can be used within itself and outside the class. That means like another class want to use this class also. then it can use. And again, the variables, the methods, again depends on the access modifiers of that variables inside the class and the methods inside the class. It will be dependent on the access modifiers of that variables and methods. But public, let's talk only with respect to a class. When it's a private, it cannot be accessible. Public, it can be accessible by the other classes as well. But what is the limit? It will be accessible within the organization. That means within your Salesforce instance. If you want to use this code outside your Salesforce or like outside of your Salesforce platform, it cannot be accessible. It can be only accessible within the org. Again, there is a concept called namespaces. So in the same org, we can have a multiple namespaces as well. But usually we don't use the namespaces. The when we use namespaces was when the multiple groups are working on the same org and you want to um, differentiate like how to differentiate the code between one group and the second group. You can enable the namespaces, and one group can use one namespace and other group can use a one namespace, so that it will be differentiated what things are belongs to what group. And if you are going to sell, like you are building some products in Salesforce and you want to build the product and you want to place your product in an app exchange where you want to like either freely make it available or like sell the products in a subscription base and all, then you should follow the naming convention. And when you use a naming convention, and it will be packaged and shared where there are some code hidden or code accessibility also controlled using that namespace. That means, let's say you are building a product and selling it on a app exchange, and only thing was you're going to sell not the code, you're going to sell the features that you build, the automation, the use of the code, the execution part only you're selling. If you have like your code having a visibility, the person to whom you're selling, so what they will do, again they will sell to some other people. You will not getting that patents, right? So what it's going to do was, using the naming convention, we have an option to hide the classes. So even though it's a public or a global, still you can hide the class. So the thing was, when the access modifier is there, like the execution part is accessible, but the what is the code in that class will be dependent on your like how you are hiding the code. While using a namespaces, where you can use hiding the classes in outside your organization or within your organization. So that's the naming convention part. So public is where you can access is like when you have a public access modifier, you can access the class within the organization, and if you have a namespace, within the namespace, and which cannot be used outside your organization. Okay, now then global is like to give access to the outside of your platform or outside of your organization. If you want to access, anybody can access to this class, then only we have to make it as a global. And like when we use a global normally, like let's say if you're having some integration with the other systems, that means you are exposing some methods to some other different platform where it getting called to a Salesforce, and this class will be accessed, and whatever the code is there, it will be executed from the third party. In those scenarios, we have to use a global access modifiers. So these are the three basic access modifiers while creating a class. Now, the second part is virtual abstract or with sharing or without sharing. So this is a completely a sharing level of the access. I say like these two are like one set, and these two are going to be a one set. Then why we have like all combined together? So by knowing each and we'll understand. So virtual. When we add this sharing model as a virtual for a class, that means uh, there is a class you will write, but it can be overridden by the other classes. Let's say I write one class and just have some basic functionality over there, and if I want, I can use it or I can override it. So like let's say so I don't want to repeat the functionality. I want to use the functionality. In some scenarios, I may need to override. That means I don't want the exact functionality. So I have some tweaks in my class. So what I will do was I will possess um, the contents of this virtual class in my override class, and there either I will use this virtual class methods and variables, or I'll override them. Override them means, so I will create the variables with the same name, or like I will create the methods with the same name as a virtual class. So what happens was, let's say, so first thing was you have to give the access modifier, and then I have what is the sharing model of my class, and then class and my class name, and then class name, and I don't have anything here, implement and extends. I have created a class. So I have another class, public, and it's not a virtual class, and I would say my child class, and here I'm going to override class called my class, and then it follows. In this case, what happens first, whatever there, like I'm not written any variables and methods. If you have any variables and methods in this virtual class, it's going to use them classes. Like when you have outside this class, how you're going to, like, what is the class actually? It's a blueprint of a object, right? How we going to use the class means we'll create an object with this child class. I'll say child class, and CC1, let's say. Then I'm going to use a new class instance of it. So now whatever the variables it's having, like it is having a v1 variable 1, or like a CC, and if it have a variable 2, I'm going to use, like, I can assign the values to it, or I can use the variables. So even though it is not having a variables, so if the virtual class is having a variables like this, it can be accessible language. Virtual means whatever there, sorry, when you're overriding whatever there, it will be there. And if you are if you want to override also, you can override them. So I have a two variables in the virtual class. Okay, now in this where I'm overriding it. So if you have created again a variable same name v1, and you're giving a value to it, is like my override value, let's say. So in this scenario, when you are having or declaring a variable as a v1, so which it's going to use either the variable in the child class or a variable in the my class. So it's going to use the value. The first priority will be this override class, because the concept is you're going to override the virtual class. If you have not override, if you're not overrided, then it will be the what it is in the virtual. That's how we're going to use a virtual and overriding the classes. Next, when we have an abstract class. So abstract is so here in the virtual we are having a logics and variables, everything here, and either we use it or we're going to override them. Wherein wherein the abstract class we will not having any logics in the abstract. It will only give us a structure of it. It will only define how the structure of a abstract class will be, and how many methods. Like if you have a method, like method A you having, you don't have any logic in that. So how the method A will be defined and what should be the parameters, what should be the return type, that will be defined over there. And in the where you're going to extend that abstract class, there you're going to like write your logic, and the methods also, like when you are extending the abstract class, there you have to exactly follow the blueprint of the abstract. Let's say in abstract you're having like one or two methods. In your extend method class also, you have definitely write whatever there in the abstract. It has to follow the same format. On top of it, still you can write more classes, more variables you can give, but as a minimum you have to follow however it is in the abstract, exactly same you have to follow. On top of it, if you want additional, you can do as well. So the difference is virtual, you have option, either you can override it or no need to override. But in abstract, you need to exactly follow the same way. Then only it's going to extend. That's what abstract. Abstract means it's kind of the way how you have to follow when you're extending in the other classes. Um, so just I will give another example. So here, let's say, so I have a public class, and let's say my abstract class, and before that I need to, before the class name, I need to give this abstract keyword. Then only it will understand it's the abstract class. So in that I have public, let's say method name I'm having. Abstract method one. So here I have a return type as let's say string. I have return type, and I have parameters as a string as an input one, and here I'm going to like do input one plus I'm tweaking something, and then return the variable. That's what my abstract is doing here. Sorry, sorry, I was totally wrong. So I don't have any logic here. Sorry. So I have only mentioned a return type, and I will mention what is the input parameters. That's it in my abstract class. When I want to use this abstract class in some other class and extend class. So here I'm going to extends. Here you see that extends. And what is your abstract name? My abstract class, and then fine. So here you don't have option that you either want to use it or not use. You don't have option like that. Even when you're trying to save this also, it will not allow to save you. So you had to follow the same class, exactly same you have to follow, and then you have to write your logic over here. That's how when you're having abstract and extending the classes. Fine. So that's about this two virtual and abstract. Now, with sharing and without sharing, this is like most commonly used, and this is where you will mention in day-to-day exercises where you're writing a classes or adding a logics. Everywhere you're going to use this is where like most commonly used sharing things, with sharing or without sharing. And it is not mandatory that you need to mention this and this as well. So when you have not mentioned any access modifier, the default access modifier will be a private. And when you have not mentioned any of this access control, the default will be a with sharing is a default value. If there is a no value is picked up there, and there will be a slight difference. I'll explain it after I explaining what is with sharing and without sharing. So when you're saying itself, you will understand some meaning. This is dependent on the how you were sharing access. So when you're saying sharing means like in out of box feature we explained like what is sharing settings and what is the OWD, and we have like sharing rules, like sharing, manual sharing, and role hierarchy, all these concepts, right? Like where we are trying to control the record level access and how the record is being shared across the different users. So what's the minimum level, like how we'll get access to a record? When you have created a record, then you will become an owner. So because you are the owner of that record, you will possess access to it. So you having your own record. So what you will do, you can share through a manual sharing to a different user or a group of users. It's like how your Google Drive files, right? So when you create it, you are the owner and you can do whatever you want it. And when you share with the different users, like you will share and you will mention what users and what's the access level and all, right? Similarly, the manual sharing is. So this two parts is like similarly how you having. And apart from that, we'll having some rules defined which will automatically um, define the access in it. So that are like sharing rules and OWD and epic sharing or role hierarchy. These are all on top of it coming. So again, coming back to this part with sharing and without sharing. So when you mention a class has a with sharing class, that means whatever the code that you write, it there is no impact to that code. But when you're trying to interact with the DB, that means when you're trying to get the records from a Salesforce DB, let's say if you are having an account object and in your Apex code, you are trying to get some records from a DB. Let's say Here, mm, so here, when we having it, okay, in my class, I'm having a, just I'm trying to copy paste so that it will be faster. So I'm having that, and I'm going to use with sharing class, sharing class. Here, I have logic to get a data. So I want to have a list of accounts. I will say account list where I'm going. So these are not covered, but just for explaining, I'm trying to use it. So we're going to learn how this queries will be. So, so account. So I'm trying to query the records from the account object and storing over here. Okay. Now, normal logic, like if you have other coding things, there will be no impact with sharing or without sharing. But wherever you are trying to access the S object data that is queried from the database and you are trying to do some manipulations, there it's going to have a different way based on you are with sharing or without sharing. Let's say actually in the account object there are like 1,000 records, but the person you are logged in and using this class, there you don't have access to all the 1,000 records. You're having access to only 10 records. Sorry. Oh yeah, 10 records you're having access. So what happens? This query result is going to be only 10 records, not the 1,000 records. The thing was when you having queries and DML operations, and let's say you're having some logic over here. Um, that means like the usually the for loop, these are all we're going to discuss. So don't worry much about here. Just I'm trying to explain you how differently it behaves when you're having a with sharing and without sharing. And at the end, we are going to update the account list here. What I'm trying to do was here. So I want to make revenue as some 25K and I'm trying to update the accounts. So if this is a piece of logic, then what happens? So this logic will make different set of records executed when different persons are using this method with sharing based on their access. Let's say if a person who having 100 records access to on account object, it will execute 100 records if the person is come and use this method. And if an admin who having access to the full data of 1,000 records, then it will be 1,000 records. If a person with no access, then there will be no action happen here. So it depends on how the records being shared with the logged in user. It could be any means, like it could be because he's owner, because the record is being shared with as a manual sharing or a sharing rule. It doesn't matter how the person possesses the access to the records. It only look at if the record is shared with the user, then only show it. When you mention it as a without sharing, it doesn't matter whether the person is having access to that record or share that record or not. It doesn't matter. Without sharing, removing the part of sharing and execute the logic as a what we call it as a system mode. With sharing, we say it as a user. Usually, the with sharing called as a user mode. That how the user having access, the same way it will execute. When you're saying it without sharing, it called system mode. Usually, like removing the sharing completely out of the context and just what is the logic, it has to be executed. That means it could be 1 lakh or 2 lakh, and even you don't have access to that records also, it will execute in a system mode. As a system, how it looks, it will be executed in that format. Okay, it's going to be end